Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome to our Sunday school hour. It will be a special Sunday school this morning. We will hear from our brother, Reverend Jeremiah Montgomery, an update on the work of the Committee on Home Missions and Church Extension of our denomination. Before I welcome our brother to give us his presentation, why don't we begin our time together by singing 419. It's one of the hymns on missions, 419. Let's stand and sing together. Amen. You may be seated. Well, as a church, we always pray for the work of the Committee on Home Missions and Church Extension of our denomination. Most of you are familiar with the work of the committee because you also support the work of the committee with your financial support and also with your prayers. And this morning we have a privilege of having Reverend Jeremiah Montgomery with us. Our brother dedicated this Sunday to be with us, to bring us up to speed with the work of his committee, how the Lord is leading and blessing the work, his work and the work of the committee as a whole. So it's a privilege for us to have our brother. Jeremiah also served our denomination as a missionary in Asia. So he comes to the work of the committee with rich experience and knowledge and the Lord's blessings in his life and ministry. So I'm going to welcome a brother to take the floor and give us his presentation. Welcome, Jeremiah. Come, brother.
Wave at me if I forgot to turn the microphone on. We're good? Thank you. Yeah. Do that again if I forget later. Or if I'm singing later and it's like too loud, just do this. That's also okay. It's a privilege to know your pastor, to count him as one of my friends. And I know a couple others who are here from General Assembly and other contexts. So it's a real joy to be with you. As Pastor said, my name is Jeremiah. I'm married to my wife, Elizabeth, who wishes she could be with me. She loves to travel with me, but our kids are in a Christian school right now, and they've got class. We have been married 23 some years. We have 5 children, ages 21 down to 13. About every 2 years, a new person with our last name showed up. People used to ask us, do you know how that happens? And we said, yes, we know how that happens, and we're thankful that it has happened. Our oldest son is married, lives in Ohio. Our second son is getting married next year, also lives in Ohio. And we right now live in Philadelphia area because that's where the OPC administrative offices are. But I serve the Committee on Home Missions and Church Extension, and if you say that is a long name, it is a long name. It is the oldest standing committee of the denomination. Standing committee means it operates year-round. It's not just temporary. And I like to say we're the oldest standing committee that's still standing. We were set up at the very first General Assembly of the OPC, and at that time, of course, the OPC was very small, just a small number of pastors, elders, and churches, and they were trying to figure out how they were going to become a denomination that worked together. And so they set up the Committee on Home Missions and Church Extension to just help hold things together in between the General Assembly meetings. As time has gone on, our mission has become more focused. And so today, when we think about home missions and church extension, we think about 3 things. We think about home missions, evangelism, being used by the Lord to make new Christians by His power. And then, of course, when somebody becomes a Christian, we don't want them to just go off on their own. Ideally, what do we want to happen when somebody comes to Christ? We want them to get connected to what? A local church, right? So the church extension part of our name pushes into that. So we want to be used by the Lord to bring new souls to Christ, but then we also want to plant new congregations where those souls can worship and serve together. So home missions and church extension. And then the last thing is the first word in our name, committee. We try to take it very seriously that we are a committee. We serve the church. We're not masters. We serve the church. We come alongside presbyteries and congregations to help them with evangelism and to help them with church planting. We have sort of a big vision, and then we have a strategic vision that I would just share with you. Our big vision is to see the Orthodox Presbyterian Church, our denomination, grow strong in evangelism and church planting and in reaching the lost. I grew up in the OPC. I was talking to one of your deacons. Apparently he did too. There are not a lot of people who have actually grown up in the denomination their whole life. How many people here today can say they've spent their whole life in the OPC? So just a handful of us, really. And when you go to General Assembly every year, they ask the pastors and elders, how many of you grew up in the OPC? And it's not a large number, maybe 10, 20%. Am I right? It's like 10 to 20%. It's a small number. So I've grown up in the OPC. I love our denomination. But one of the things that I noticed growing up in our denomination was that we are much stronger at teaching people who are already Christians and then find the OPC than we are in reaching lost people and bringing them to Jesus for the first time. And it's a little bit of a pity because if you know the history of the OPC, you might think the opposite would happen. Why did the OPC start? There was a big controversy in the beginning of the 20th century. Does anybody remember the name of that controversy? Anybody? It was called the Fundamentalist Modernist Controversy. Does anybody know what modernism is? When we talk about theological modernism, it's basically denying the Bible but still calling yourself a Christian. I saw a clip on the internet one time, and it was supposed to be a humorous sketch, but somebody asked one of the characters, "What's a modernist?" And the man says to his friend, "Oh, modernist is code for unbeliever. It's a secret code that means unbeliever." So in the early 20th century, the Presbyterian Church in the United States, the major Presbyterian denomination, was still calling itself Christian, but they weren't actually believing the things that were in the Bible anymore. You didn't have to believe in the authority of Scripture. You didn't have to believe in the miracles of Jesus. You didn't have to believe in the deity of Christ or the resurrection. And this was becoming more and more visible on the foreign missions field. And particularly in the Asian foreign missions field, there were foreign missionaries, one of whom was named Pearl Buck, written many famous novels. But they would go over to the foreign missions field. They're supposed to be telling lost people about Jesus, and instead they're just telling lost people, be a good person. And so the men who eventually founded the Orthodox Presbyterian Church found out about this. And they were very upset and said, we are sending them to reach the lost with the gospel, and they're not preaching the gospel to the lost. And that started the conflict, which then erupted here in the church in the United States that we call the fundamentalist modernist controversy. The modernists were the people who did not believe the gospel. And the fundamentalists, this was a little bit of a slanderous term that was applied by their opponents. They said, "Oh, you're so fundamentalistic." And all they really wanted to do was say, we should just believe the Bible. So the fundamentalist modernist controversy, it erupted in the United States, but it started on the foreign missions field. And it started with a concern that the lost be reached with the gospel. And so the Committee on Home Missions and Church Extension, we want to see our denomination become as strong in reaching the lost as we are in teaching those who are already found. That's our big vision. Our strategic vision, though, like how do we actually do that, is we come alongside churches and presbyteries to help them start new evangelistic endeavors or new church plants. And we provide kind of three big things. We provide leadership, we provide training, we provide counsel and advice, and then we provide financing. We provide financial assistance to help start new churches. So those are the three things that we do. We provide leadership by coming and visiting churches, talking about our work. We also go and we do evangelistic conferences. I'm going next weekend. I'll be in Charlotte, where I'll be teaching for 2 days on personal evangelism. That's part of our ministry. We get our church planters together once a year, and we provide a week-long helps. He's like the first man on the ground. He's the battlefield commander whenever we're trying to start new church plants. So my committee, at the denominational level, we train church planters, we train congregations through evangelistic training, and we assist the regional home missionaries. We also do translation. We provide translation of tracts. We write new tracts. So some of the things we've done over the last 2 years, we have an evangelistic tract in English. It's called "What's Your Story?" Have any of you ever seen this tract? I didn't see them back there, but it's been around for a while. But for a long time, it was only in English. Well, in our denomination, we have a growing number of churches who have opportunities to reach out to Latino communities. And so last year, we took that tract and we translated it into Spanish. ¿Cuál es tu historia? And if you say, my Spanish is bad, you're right. I'm just starting to learn Spanish, so it's going to take a while. We also have a few churches, a smaller number, but a few churches in certain parts of the country, Southern California, Seattle area, that are having an opportunity now to reach into Mandarin-speaking communities, Chinese-speaking communities. And I was visiting one of them last year, and I saw that all of their evangelistic material was like photocopied on really kind of poor paper. And so I thought, we've already translated this tract into Spanish. Why don't we translate it into Mandarin? So we did that this year as well. We translated that same tract, "What's Your Story?" into Mandarin Chinese. And I can say this one a little better. "你的故事是什么?" What is your story? So that's one of the things that we do. We provide evangelistic resources. We also provide evangelistic resources in English. So this year we published a new tract for personal witness called "Life Without Pretending." This tract is written more in a first-person sort of testimonial approach with very kind of accessible language. It's the kind of tract that you could give to somebody on an airplane. In fact, I gave this, not this particular one, but I gave a copy of this tract last week to a man on an airplane in Los Angeles. But it starts out by, the subtitle is Why I Am Still a Christian. In a world, in a society that's increasingly hostile to Christianity, where there's not any social advantage to being a believer, well, why still follow Jesus? And this tract starts out by saying, here are the 3 reasons that are not the answer. It starts out by saying, I'm not a Christian because it's easy. Is it easy to be a Christian? No. So we're going to own that right up front. This tract says, I'm not a Christian because it's easy. Following Jesus is hard. It goes on to say, I'm not a Christian because I understand everything in the Bible. Does anybody in this room understand everything in the Bible? No. So we're going to own that as well. He also says, I am not a Christian because the church or other Christians have never hurt me. That's another common excuse that people make. I can't go to church because Christians have hurt me. Well, how many of us have been hurt by other Christians over the course of our life? Many times, right? Then it goes on to say, though, I follow Jesus because I'm convinced he tells the truth. Jesus doesn't just tell the truth, he is the truth. I love Jesus because he reveals God's astonishing goodness. I haven't done anything to earn this. I follow Jesus because God has given me a new life. And there's more to it. I'm summarizing for you. But it's written in such a way that you could give this to somebody you meet and say, here's why I'm a Christian. So we provide these evangelistic resources. Eventually, I'd like to have this translated as well, but right now it's only available in English. So those are resources that we've produced to try to reach lost people. We also, though, take it very seriously that part of our job in home missions is to help train people who are already believers to be more evangelistic. So we write articles for New Horizons, we go and do these personal training conferences, but we also provide resources for those of us who are already believers. So this is a new booklet that we published this year in coordination with Danny Olinger and the Christian Ed Committee. It's a little harder to read from a distance. Bringing good news to a lost world. So some of you may remember, how many of you get New Horizons magazine at your house? If you don't get it, you can get it for free. So if you don't get it, tell Pastor Zeki, he can get you signed up for that. But in the March issue of this year, earlier this year, there was an article with the same title, Bringing Good News to a Lost World, sort of a primer on personal evangelism. Well, what we did is we took that article, we condensed it, and we published it as a booklet so that we can send these to churches as well. So that's part of what we do. It's part of how we try to provide leadership and training for the denomination. A lot of what we do in home missions, though, is stuff that you'll never see. Right now, we have 31 new and continuing mission works, and each one of them has a pastor. And those pastors have sessions that they work with. They have regional home missionaries that they can talk to. But sometimes you just need to talk to somebody who's not directly in your chain of command. Or you need to talk to somebody who may have a wider perspective and may know about what's going on in the whole denomination. And so the church planters and regional home missionaries, they will call us and they'll ask questions. They'll say, hey, I'm facing this kind of situation in my church plant. Have you ever seen that before? And sometimes we can say, yes, we've experienced that. Here's how we've approached it. Or we might say, I've not experienced this, but I know another church planter in Arizona who's dealing with something very similar, and we can make that connection. So we provide a lot of counsel and sort of behind-the-scenes advice to our church planters and regional home missionaries. And then as sessions or presbyteries are getting ready to call or start new works, they'll often ask us, hey, do you know of any guys, any candidates who would be good church planters in this area? And we'll say, well, tell me about the work, tell me about the group. What's the community like? And then we'll think and we'll try to see if we can make a connection. One of the advantages for me is serving at the denominational level is I get to visit churches and areas of the denomination all over the country. And so it gives you sort of a 30,000-foot view, and sometimes you can make connections for people that they wouldn't know existed. The other piece of what we do is we provide funding for church plants. So most churches in our denomination give to something called the Worldwide Outreach Fund, or once a year to the thank offering. You all know about the thank offering and the Worldwide Outreach, right? Well, for every dollar that goes to the thank offering or the Worldwide Outreach Fund, Right now, 42 cents of every dollar goes to the Home Missions Committee. And then what we do is we work with the presbyteries to plan how to support new church plants and church planters. So that's part of what we do. And it's a wonderful ministry. It's one of the best things about missions in the OPC, whether it's home missions or foreign missions. And I've as Pastor Zeki has said, I've been involved with both. I was a church planter years ago, then I was a foreign missionary, and then I was a pastor again, and now I work in home missions, and also I'm a part-time pastor at my church. But one of the wonderful things that we do as a denomination is we don't make our church planters or our foreign missionaries raise their own support. How many of you have ever had a friend or know somebody who was a missionary of some sort and had to raise funds? Right? It's very, very common in other denominations and in other organizations, and it's really challenging for them. One of my heroes, still one of my heroes, although I'm not a foreign missionary anymore, was Reverend John Payton. Any of you ever heard of his story? Wonderful story. If you haven't, talk to Pastor Zeki. We'll get you those books. They're so good. But he was a missionary in the 1860s to Cannibal Islands in the South Pacific. But one of the really disappointing parts of his story is how much time he had to spend outside of the islands, sailing around trying to raise support so that he could continue the ministry there. One of the things that we're happy to do as a denomination is we support our church planters and foreign missionaries so that they don't have to. So remember that, like when you give to Worldwide Outreach or when you give to the thank offering, you're supporting those missionaries so that they can focus on what they should be focused on, people and preaching and prayers. And what time do we need to stop?
15 to 11.
Okay, so we've still got some time. I'd like to give you a little bit of a snapshot of what we've been doing over the course of 2025. But I also want to say, if you have questions or comments, just raise your hands. I don't need to do all the talking. I talk a lot, so it's okay for people to interrupt me. I don't mind. And also, I used to teach junior high Sunday school. So if I ask a question and nobody answers, I will call on you. I'm not afraid. So just so you know. Before I get in the weeds of the details of what we've been doing this year, I want to encourage you with a statistic. How many of you have ever heard that Presbyterians are sometimes called the frozen chosen? Have you ever heard that? Anytime I hear that, I just laugh and laugh and laugh. It's so funny. Oh, did you make that up? But in the case of the OPC, we certainly have our challenges as a denomination. I will not deny that. And I've been in the denomination my whole life, so I know. But one of the things you can't say about the OPC is that we're not serious about planting new churches. At the end of 2024, so at the end of last year, we had 300 established congregations like Redeemer, and we had 41 mission works across the denomination. Now, when you do the math on that, so 41 divided by 341, what that means is that on any given Sunday when groups gather for worship as OPC groups, 12% are mission works. 12% of our congregations are mission works. That tells you something, that we are intentional, we are aggressive in the proper sense about trying to plant new outposts for the kingdom of Jesus. And of those 41 mission works that are out there, 31 of them receive support from our committee. Sometimes a presbytery or a congregation will start a mission work and they don't need financial support from us. That's okay. Or sometimes the mission work starts and it receives financial support from us. But our financial support typically lasts for 4 years. They complete that support and they still haven't quite organized. So that's why the number's different, 41 to 31. But last year, our committee supported 31 new and continuing mission works, 10 regional home missionaries across the denomination. And of these 31 mission works, 8 of them were brand new. So last year, through our denomination, through all of us working together, including your congregation, giving to Worldwide Outreach and the thank offering, we started 8 new mission works, and 2 of them were in this presbytery. In January, we started a mission work in Kannapolis, North Carolina. Pastor there is named David Vogel. Have any of you know the name? So David Vogel, he started in Kannapolis. That's a mission work of this presbytery. Also in January, we started a church plant in Troy, Ohio. probably very few of us know where Troy, Ohio is. I used to live in that area, so I know where it is, but it's north. Any of you heard of the city of Dayton? And by the way, Ohio is where flight was invented. If you see these license plates from North Carolina that say first in flight, that's propaganda. That's like saying Florida was first in space, just because the rocket launched there. Well, just because the first airplane took off in North Carolina does not mean the North Carolinians invented flight. FYI. If you ever go to Ohio, it's very important that you not make that mistake. Do not say, in fact, I did it once, this is funny. I was in a meeting once with my elders, and this is in Ohio. I served in Ohio, and I was only joking, but I just wanted to see how they'd react. And somebody said something about North Carolina, and I said, well, they were first in flight. And it was like pin drop silence. And they all look at me. I'm like, I'm just kidding. I know it was Ohio. They're like, okay. But we started a church plant in Troy, Ohio. So Kannapolis, North Carolina, Troy, Ohio. Then in March, we rebooted a church in Hawaii that had been struggling for almost 20 years. There had been a mission work there that had struggled for a long, long time. Finally, the man who had been the pastor there said, I'm obviously not the guy to plant this church. He took a different call. We sent in a brand new church planter. They're almost rebooting from scratch. Not quite, but starting over. Levine, Arizona. So one of the things that's very interesting, you probably have experienced some of this in this part of the country. Over the last 5 years, just because of different cultural and sociological and political changes in our society, people are moving to different parts of the country, right? So people are moving out of the Northeast and moving into the Southeast. Have you seen population increase around here because of that? Something like 1,000 people a day move to Florida. I mean, you have these migrations in our country. Well, another place where people are migrating is people are migrating away from Southern California, and guess where they're landing? They're landing in Arizona. So Phoenix is booming. I was just there last weekend, and there's all kinds of new housing, all kinds of stuff being developed out there. So in the southwest side of Phoenix, Levine, is a little kind of outlying community. We're planting a new church. So Levine started in March. In April, I think this is also in your presbytery, up in the Richmond area. Is Richmond in West Creek? Reverend Devin Gay started a mission work. He was installed as a pastor up there in the Richmond area. That was in April. And then in Grand Rapids, Michigan, a young man named J.C. Davidson has been starting a church plant there. And then in May, we started a church plant in Peoria, Illinois, and then one in Madisonville, Louisiana. Madisonville is on the north side of Lake. What's the name of the lake that's? Yes, thank you. Just north of New Orleans. Say it again. Pontchartrain, yes, thank you. French is not my language. So those are some of the things that your gifts and your support of Worldwide Outreach are doing. You are starting new outposts for the kingdom of Jesus in North America, and that's something to really be thankful for. And I know it's hard to visualize because you don't see them, but your giving and your prayers for them enable them to focus on the work of ministry rather than worrying about how they're going to put bread on the table, and that is an extraordinary gift. And I can testify to that firsthand. As a church planter 15 years ago, and then as a foreign missionary less than 10 years ago, there's so many other stressors that come into your life as a church planter and as a foreign missionary. And to be able to not have to worry about how am I going to buy groceries, how am I going to pay my rent, that is a huge blessing. So you may think, well, we don't do much to support missions. If you're doing that, if you're giving to Worldwide Outreach, you're giving to the thank offering, you are doing a lot to support home missions and foreign missions. Let me pause there and say, questions or comments? Anybody? Yes, Rich.
You talked about next weekend the evangelism conference you're doing. Will that be recorded or broadcast?
I believe the answer is yes. So if I were being asked to speak about my foreign missions experience, the answer would be no. In fact, last weekend in Phoenix, part of why I was out there was to talk about my time overseas. We couldn't record that. But when it comes to home missions training and evangelistic training, that is recorded most of the time. The material that I'm presenting in the Charlotte area next week, I presented earlier this year for that church plant in Troy, Ohio, and I know that they recorded it. Those videos are on YouTube. So I believe the plan is for the church in Charlotte to live stream it probably, and then, the live streaming turns into a video that will be on YouTube.
Is that resurrection or?
So great question. So it's actually being hosted by an ARP church in Huntersville, but Resurrection, Nathan Trice's church, I think is also promoting that and is going to be they're going to be there, but I think the host church is the ARP in Huntersville. But it started out, so I'm very close friends with the pastor, who's the ARP pastor, and he asked if I would come and do this training at his church, and I said, well, sure. And then he told Nathan about it, and so I think it started out as sort of an ARP thing, but now I think it's an ARP OPC thing. So yeah, I believe those will be recorded. But if you email me a week from Monday, I'll let you know. Yeah. Other questions or comments?
Jamal,
Yes.
you mentioned about putting more effort on reaching out, the lost outside of, the OPC.
Yeah.
How is the community helping local churches and presbyteries to not only be aware of that, but also implement that on the ground?
Oh, that's a great question. So how do we, at the denominational level, equip or help the presbyteries and church planters to do that? We try to do it with gentleness and respect, understanding because we are the servants, we're not the masters. We cannot, we never just show up at a church and say you have to implement this kind of program. We never show up at a presbytery and say you have to do this. But one of the things that we do is before a presbytery or a church plants a church, they always have to submit what we call a stewardship plan. It's a written document that just tells us their plan for the ministry. How are you going to plant this church? Tell us about the community. Tell us about the group that you're using to form. And part of that stewardship plan is tell us about your evangelistic plans for the area. And those plans can vary depending on the community, but what we don't want to see is a zero. Like we do not want to see a stewardship plan that says, well, we'll figure that out later. No. We are not in the business of planting churches just to shorten somebody's commute. We are not in the business, and I say this carefully, but hear me carefully. We're also not in the business of planting churches just to make people more reformed. Now, we're very happy. We're very happy when people who are already Christians discover the Reformed faith, come into the OPC, and grow in their vision of God. Why? Why are we happy? Because we believe that a Reformed understanding of the Scriptures makes God big and makes us small. And it's biblical. That's my parents' own story. My parents were already Christians when they joined the OPC when I was a baby. I'm so thankful that they did, and I'm so thankful that the OPC welcomes those who didn't grow up in it. My parents didn't grow up in it. Because my parents didn't grow up in the OPC, but the OPC welcomed them, I was able to grow up in the OPC. So we will always be thankful for that opportunity to teach the found. But ultimately, the reason we plant churches is to build new outposts for the kingdom of Jesus, to reach the lost. And so one of the things we do is we look at the stewardship plans and say, do you have a coherent, real plan to reach into your community? And if they say no, then we say, we're not going to provide funding. You can still move forward because we're not in charge. You and your presbytery can still move forward. But we have a stewardship from the denomination. When churches like Redeemer give money to worldwide outreach and some of that money comes to us, the denomination as a whole is trusting us to invest its resources to reach new souls. And if you don't have a plan to reach new souls, then we're not going to put the gifts of God's people behind that. So that's one thing we do. The other thing we do is when we do that annual church planter training, one of the talks that I give to the first-year church planters is I give them a talk on personal evangelism. Because I know that one of the hard... I was a church planter. I know how hard it is. Even if every day you're praying that the Lord would help you to be intentionally evangelistic and that He would use you to reach new souls, even if you're praying that prayer every day, it's still not easy to meet complete outsiders in a way that will open up a spiritual conversation. That's a real challenge. And so one of the things that I do at our church planter training is share with our new church planters, many of them are new to the ministry, I just share them for about an hour. I give them a talk on, here's everything I've learned about meeting people in spiritually significant ways. Here's everything I've learned about starting conversations in ways that are not overly awkward. The message, of course, the message of the gospel will always be offensive. But there is a way to speak to people where, as far as possible, you are not being an offensive person. And so I spend time training people on that. And then like that conference next weekend in Charlotte, that's another thing we do for churches that are not church plants, but say, hey, we want to grow in evangelism, and we really don't know a whole lot about it. Our heart is there, the Spirit is willing, but we just don't have the experience. We will come and do a conference for churches. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So I'm 22 years old, and in my age range generation, there's a big spike in people who are trying to find Jesus, from complete atheism to trying to find Jesus.
Yeah.
There's a lot of false teaching
Right.
or teaching that has some truth in it
Yep.
that we're finding on social media that kind of leads them in a little bit, but then kind of
Right.
distorts the reality of what it is.
Yep.
And the OPC can be kind of hard to present to a new person trying to find the faith.
Yeah.
With all of the social media and basic arguments for soft type of Christianity.
You're right.
So how does the OPC plant their presence in the college age, high school communities without trying to weaken what we believe in, but also help them to be informed properly?
No, that's a great question. What's your name? Say it again. Ella. Thank you, Ella. It's a complicated, it's a great question. The answer is we don't have a great answer at this point. That's the honest truth. I was going to say a couple weeks, but it was a couple weeks before a couple weeks. It's been about a month. Myself and the home mission, I'm the home missions guy. The home missions guy, the foreign missions guy, the Christian ed guy, we met, and the diaconal ministries guy, we met with a young man who is very savvy when it comes to social media and developing these kind of short form videos. And he said to us a lot of what you just said. He said, false teaching is out there, bad teaching is out there, and they are ahead of us in terms of knowing how to use these technologies. And he says, if Gen Z is on TikTok or is on Instagram, and all the false teachers are out there, wouldn't it be good if somehow we, the OPC, could carefully but faithfully figure out a way to have some presence there? And so we are going to be working with him over the next year to two to try to dip our toe in that water. But we're behind the eight ball on that one. We're not up to speed as we should. And you're right, the OPC does have a steep learning curve. It starts with our name, right? The Orthodox Presbyterian Church. What are you, Eastern Orthodox? Are you Greek Orthodox? Are you Ethiopian Orthodox? Well, no. Why are you called the Orthodox Presbyterian Church? And then it's a long story, right? So you're right, it's a challenge for us, but I can assure you we're working on it, but I have to confess to you we're not where I would like us to be. But it's a growth area, right? So I'm thankful that what I'm really thankful for, Ella, is that the leaders of all the committees were sitting there together in a room saying, we need to grow in this. So we're agreed that we need to grow. We got to start. So thank you for that question. Other questions? This is good interaction. Questions or comments? I should say too, Ella, just as a follow-up, one of the things that I like to think of it as one step that we've taken in the right direction is we are more conscious of the fact that the way that the social media advent over the last 15 years. I mean, keep in mind, brothers and sisters, modern social media is only about 15 years old. Instagram was invented in 2012. The front-facing camera on your cell phone didn't start coming out until 2012. And so it's really in the last 15 years that all this has just radically changed the way we interact as a society. One of the effects that's had is that people don't read as much as they used to. Reading attention spans have diminished. Have any of you ever heard the acronym TLDR? Too long, didn't read, right? So some of our evangelistic materials in the past with the OPC have been pretty long. So with this booklet in particular, when we set out to create this book, I said it has to be under 700 words. I mean, even like the Associated Press, like national news organizations are telling their journalists, like, you can't go over 600 words. People won't read it. Now, I love to read. Anybody here love to read? Yeah, it's the OPC. People love to read. But a lot of people don't, right? So I could sit around and complain, nobody likes to read, and still write really long books that nobody will read. Or I could say, okay, people don't like to read. Can I express the gospel in about 600 words? So this booklet is 635 words. So we're not completely out of touch, but we have a long way to go in that.
I think that even just the presence of maybe younger college-age people, like the guy who's developing their social media, who have the ability to talk and relate to people in our generation without coming off as, I guess, out of touch. They would understand if they could go around like these college areas in Atlanta, with all of these younger people, and even just be able to talk with them in a way that isn't so confusing right off the bat for
Right on.
somebody who's new to Jesus.
Yeah, right.
But wants to do the right thing.
Yep.
But then, the OPC has
Yep.
a lot of details to it that can really throw somebody off.
Yeah, the learning curve is steep.
Yeah.
Right, no, you're very right. Another thing that we're trying to do in home missions to help, again, just to learn a little bit about how to be better communicators in this way is one of our churches in Southwest Ohio, the OP church is called Living Water Orthodox Presbyterian Church, but it is 25 minutes north of a Christian college called Cedarville University. Any of you ever heard of Cedarville? So Cedarville is a Baptist school, but there are 25 to 30 Cedarville students that make the commute every week up to the Living Water. And so one of the things that Home Missions, we partnered for a 3-year period with Living Water to help them bring on a second pastor who could really be on the campus most of the time. And so hopefully he is learning lessons about just how to engage and interact with Gen Z, so that can then inform our ministry as a denomination. There are times when just the generational differences just catch up with us and we don't realize what we don't know. I was born in 1981, January 1981, so you could debate whether I'm a Gen Xer or a millennial. Whatever, That's a very millennial thing to say. But I have heard people older than me, people who would be, Gen Xers or baby boomers, they will say things like, oh, millennials have no desire to sacrifice and give anymore. The young people these days have no desire to do that. And I have to turn to them and say, well, respectfully, that's not true. How many of you have ever heard of GoFundMe, right? Somebody has a health crisis, they throw up a GoFundMe page, and they make so much giving pours in. I said, but there's a generational difference here. Whereas in my parents' and my grandparents' generation, it was often enough to just say, this is your duty, so give and support, and people would. I said, millennials and people younger than that don't respond to that sort of just direct assertion of authority. But if you tell... there's generational trust has broken down. Whether it should or whether it shouldn't have, it has. But if you tell them the story, if you cast the vision for why this is important, they will give. GoFundMe is proof. So just trying to sort of, part of my role is to try to be a bridge, right, and to help us navigate these generational differences, and realizing that, I'm now in the middle. I'm not as young as I used to be. People look at me and say, "You're young to have 5 kids." I'm like, I'm in my 40s. So that's a really great insight, and we are working on it, but we're behind the curve. Other questions or comments? I can share with you some prayer requests. Would that be helpful? Yes. So one of the things that has been a factor over the last couple years, so I've now been serving in the Home Missions leadership for just over 2 years, like 2 years and a couple days. One of the things that's been a challenge for us over the last couple years is that across the denomination, giving to worldwide outreach has been lower than we had hoped. It's been below budget. The thank offering at the end of the year has usually exceeded the goal, but the overall giving throughout the year has not quite met the budget. So Home Missions has been below budget for the last 2 years. So our receipts are a little lower than we had hoped. At the same time, the opportunities we have to invest in church plants have been growing. And so for the last couple of years, we've been in this interesting place where requests, opportunities have outpaced resources. I would say requests have outpaced receipts, or opportunities have outpaced resources. And I always like to say that is a good problem to have, but it is still a problem, right? You have all these opportunities to plant churches, all these presbyteries coming and saying, hey, we've got all these opportunities. And we have to say we can't fund them all, or we can't fund them all at 100%. Last year, at our big meeting at the end of 2024, we were able to provide support to every request, almost every request, but we had to tell all of them, you have to take a step down in terms of how much we can give you. So we said yes, but less last year. This coming year, 2026, we have to set a budget ceiling, and that means we're only going to be able to, depending on what time of the year different church plants launch, we might only be able to plant as few as 5 churches across the whole denomination next year, 5 new works. Maybe more than that, depending on if they start later in the year. But the reality is right now in home missions, our opportunities are outpacing our resources. We've been spending reserves for a number of years, and we believe that reserves are to be invested. They're not to be hoarded. But we've been spending reserves at an unsustainable level, so we have to start bringing the amount of reserve spending back closer to zero so that we can replenish our reserves. So please just pray that the Lord would, the Lord knows what churches He wants to plant, and the Lord knows, and we certainly know, that brothers and sisters all over the country are facing financial challenges in our families and our congregations. So, I just moved to Philadelphia area a year ago. Trust me, I know cost of living is high in a lot of places, so totally get it. At the same time, this is a need. So let's just pray that the Lord would provide what we need so that we can continue to invest in new churches. Related to that, this year for the thank offering, this is something you can pray for particularly. This past year at the General Assembly, the OPC General Assembly kind of made an extraordinary decision. So they said that this year they're going to set the goal of the thank offering for the whole denomination. We're going to try to reach $2 million for the thank offering. If we get up to 1.6 million, the money will be divided the way it normally is. Some to foreign missions, some to home missions, some to Christian education. But if we go above 1.6 million, anything above 1.6 million is going to go 100% to home missions to help replenish those reserves that my committee has been investing so that we can continue to invest. We don't want to be in a place where we're not able to plant new churches, because new churches are it's proven throughout history that it is the planting of new churches that reaches new souls. Existing churches, we want to reach out to lost people as well, but it's planting new churches, being aggressive in church planting that continues to reach brand new people. We don't want to ever stop that. Also, church planters often end up as foreign missionaries, so we want to plant churches because that's how people gain the experience that will often propel them into foreign missions field. That was my story. I started out as a church planter for 6 years, then went to the foreign missions field. So this is a major challenge for us. So please pray for the Lord to provide the finances and also for a generous thank offering. And then I want to share with you 2 requests that I pray. This is on my daily prayer list. So I pray it for myself, but I also pray it for the denomination. My major prayer for the OPC, Home Missions, this is my number 1 prayer for us, is that the Lord would grow us as a denomination to be as fruitful in reaching the lost as we are in teaching the found. As a denomination, we have some gifts in teaching people who are already Christians, and I want those to stay in place, but I also want us to grow just as fruitful in reaching the lost, so that we would be as fruitful in reaching the lost as in teaching the found. And how do we implement that? My prayer, this is my second most important prayer for the OPC, is that the Lord would make new Christians every day through the ministry of the OPC, directly or indirectly. And I have a story about indirect salvation through the OPC that maybe I can share and then conclude. Last year, I was in Wisconsin at our church planter training. I was visiting one of our church plants, and one of the elders, he actually wasn't one of the elders of that church plant, but he was in the area. He came up and he said, "Jeremiah, I have to tell you this great story." I said, "All right, tell me." He said, "A couple years ago, my wife was driving through the Midwest on her way back to Wisconsin from somewhere where she was traveling, and she stopped on a Sunday morning and worshiped at an OPC church. And he told me the name of the church, and I knew the church, and I knew the pastors." He said, and she heard this wonderful, wonderful sermon from one of the Gospels, and she took all these notes. And she brought it home, and when she came home and she showed me, she said, this was the guy's name is Brian. She's like, "Brian, this was just a great sermon. Look at this." And he's like, "Well, praise the Lord. Yeah, that's wonderful." And then Brian had an opportunity sometime later to go and preach at a rescue mission in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And he said to his wife, "What am I going to speak on this time? You know, I had an old set of notes that I've used, but I don't think I want to use those this time." She said, "Take these notes from this OPC sermon that I heard and preach this." And of course, you can't simply preach somebody else's sermon. But what he did is he took the notes, he studied the passage using the notes, he sort of digested it and regurgitated it in his own form. But what he took to the rescue mission was essentially that OPC sermon. And when he preached that sermon, he said at the end of his presentation, 6 men came forward to give their lives to Christ. Now, if you've ever worked in homeless ministries, you know that the proof is in the fruit, right? The long-term commitment isn't always there. But out of the 6, probably there were at least 1 or 2. And so what an amazing thing. This is the story of how the Lord can use our denomination indirectly. And so my prayer, it does take faith, but my prayer it's on my daily prayer list, is that the Lord would use the OPC every day to make new Christians directly or indirectly. And as Ella was pointing out, maybe in the future it's going to be a clip of a sermon that's on social media that somebody sees, and maybe maybe they don't immediately bow the knee to Jesus, but maybe it puts them on a path to talk to a Christian. And in some ways, then, our denomination has contributed to the growth of the kingdom. Of course, we want people to come to faith directly through our ministry, but let's also pray that the Lord would do it indirectly. Those are my big prayers for the church. We're pretty much out of time. Would you like me to close us in prayer, or any final questions or thoughts? I think we're good. Would you like me to pray?
Yeah, go ahead and pray for it. Yeah.
Lord, we're thankful to you for the opportunity to talk this morning about how we as a whole church work to plant new churches and work to reach new souls. We do pray that you would make us faithful and fruitful. And we pray that through our denomination, though it's small, that you would be pleased to reach many lost souls and reap a great harvest. And we ask this in Jesus' name. And we ask that you would be with us now as we prepare to go to worship. In his name, amen.
Amen.